native res for ed.
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
have a choice between this or a census shirt, which was also geared toward native. I think it says every. Oh, actually, I think it was a native vote. Just kidding. But yes, I have a huge spectrum of different shades of fading red to choose from.
Fading red, right? We're gonna have pink shirts when all this is
I
over.
That's cute. Well, we are broadcasting now, so thank you, everybody. Our attendees, good morning. We're just waiting for Adelita to join us, so we'll be starting in a little bit. So I just want to start off and say muchas gracias to Gabriella and Kristel for joining us, and Adelita. This is our Cafecito, Chisme y Census that we have every Saturday to just kind of have a fun, open environment for folks to tune in, hear about why it's important, not only why it's important to fill out the census, but how specifically in your community it'll impact you. So we'll give it about 5 more minutes. I'm going to give it about 1 minute, a couple minutes. I am going to go live on my Facebook, just going to kind of, again, just do it really fun, open for folks, so that way we can see if folks are interested in, sending up some questions. They'll be able to do that. So it looks like we have Adelita, I believe, has joined us. So let me get her on Zoom. Yes, buenos dias.
Only took a minute. How are you?
Let me see. Thank you for joining us, Adelita.
Pleasure.
I'm going to.
We have to change her name.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Oh, it's done.
Bam. She's fast.
Boom. It's on it.
Boom. Boom. Yay. All right. Pues muchas gracias. Buenos días. So I'm just going to go quickly, gonna go live on my Facebook, so that way we can allow folks who are tuning in to be able to join us and ask some questions. So as I was mentioning earlier, this is our Chisme, Census y Cafecitos that we have every Saturdays. It's a very fun, open, relaxed environment where we talk about the census, but specifically how it impacts us in our community locally. So I'm so thankful for you all to be here today, porque sí es muy importante, it's really important that we talk about how the census impacts us on a local level. And so I wanted to tie in #Red4Ed, because it's a movement in which, in the past 10 years, we saw a really big impact in the count in the census. We had a drastic undercount in the census, and so therefore, we had to take drastic measures locally to ensure that we had those resources. So I know Adelita stepped out. I'm gonna stop right there so I can get live on Facebook, and then we'll get started here in about 2 minutes. So hola, Adelita.
Sorry, I needed to get my charger. I started seeing the battery light. I'm like, oh no, can't do that.
No problem, no problem. I'm actually gonna go live here on Facebook so that folks can join us. I was just mentioning again that I'm just really grateful that you have joined us. I really wanna create a space where folks can tune in and just talk about how the census impacts us on a local level. And how, locally, how in the past 10 years, because we had such an undercount in the census, how it impacted our public education resources. And therefore, locally, we had to take measures, and folks, started the Red4Ed movement. And so I want to bring that space in for you to share and talk about that. So I'm going to add my little description here. We have some attendees who have joined us. It looks like, Rosa Morales, buenos dias. That's my social work teacher from ASU School of Social Work. Actually, she was Pima Community College School of Social Work, and she introduced me to community organizing. So she's responsible, if you guys want to know, who's responsible for getting me in the movement. It's Rosa Morales. She showed me how, it's important to go out and be educated, learn as much as you can, and then bring it back to your community, and, and just be a voice and a resource for our community. So thank you, Rosa, for joining us. And Rosana Gabaldon was actually the first representative that I ever met, elected official I ever was introduced to through Mi Familia Vota. So thank you, Rosana, for joining us. I'm so excited to have you all. So, oh, I was live and I'm all talking here. So, buenos días a todos. Ana Karina Rodriguez here. I'm gonna turn my screen around so that way we can show all the beautiful faces that are here with us today. So, very excited. Muchas gracias, mujeres poderosas, for being here today. Again, another just quick introduction for our folks at Facebook. This will be the last time, and then I'll give the mic to you all. But I'm Ana Karina Rodriguez with Naleo Education Fund. I'm here joined by an awesome, poderosa panel of mujeres. Ladies, you can also actually share the Facebook Live if you want to and host a watch party. So folks in your community can also tune in. This is our Saturday Chisme, Census y Cafecitos. It's an open, fun space environment created so that we can have folks tune in and talk about how the census will impact us in a local level. So last week we talked about how Latinas have a really strong voice in our community and trusted messengers as well. So you all are trusted messengers within your community. And so today I'm so glad to be and honored to have Gabriella Cázares-Kelly join us today. She's an educator, community organizer in the Tohono Nation. And just a little shout out, she's running for Pima County Recorder, a position that I've always valued and honored. And I'm so excited to have you in this fight, Gabby. So thank you. And then we have Kristel Ann Foster. She's currently the standing president of the TUSD School Board and school board member. She's an awesome ally, Latina Poderosa. We love Kristel Foster, Chicana. We love you. Thank you so much for being with us today and for always really, making sure that there's a space for folks as well. And then Adelita Grijalva, thank you, muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. She is also currently running for Supervisor District 5 seat, and she is also a school board member at the TUSD and has been an awesome advocate for public education and for ensuring that school, as well as, Adelita, but I just really see her passion in making sure that her children also have the same education growing up in her community, which is awesome to see. Wakefield Middle School, for example, is opening up. So yes, I just want to give a shout out to there. So that's enough of me speaking. This is a space I want to hear from you all. And for the first round, you're definitely open to start off with introducing yourself and telling us a little bit more about what it is that you're doing more about who you are and your history and your past, and just let us know a little chisme about who you are, right? And we're gonna start off with the first question, which is the importance of counting all children in the 2020 census. So I'm gonna actually just go in the same order that I kind of did the introduction. It's kind of the way I have you all on my screen. So Gabriella, do you want to start off and let us know why it's important for counting all children in the 2020 census?
Skuktash, Anya Nyapchugi, Gabriella Cázares-Kelly, this is Mochkuk Amjit. So I've been an educator for about 14 years. And it goes hand in hand with community organizing. As an educator, you are community organizing and you're in community spaces. And I think one of the important things for people to really understand about the census is they feel like there might be some magic qualifier, like, well, do I only put the people that are on the lease? Are those the only people that I'm counting? And I think for people, like, they really need to understand, especially like in our community where we have so many aunties and uncles and grandparents taking care of children, where they might be a little more mobile, or they might be unofficially living with someone, sleeping on a couch or sleeping in the living room, that kind of thing. I think that people need to understand that those children need to be counted, because for each person, for each child, each person that is counted, it's about $3,000 worth of services that will go towards whatever's happening in that community. And so that if you think about $3,000 worth of either education or services at the hospital or roads, it really adds up, especially if it's in a rural area. But I think that we really need to make sure that people understand that they're not going to get in trouble if they list a child that isn't on their lease or that they don't have full custody of yet. And I think those are some of the barriers that a lot of people are kind of feeling with the census.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Gabby. Muchas gracias. Thank you. Kristel, you want to let us know why it's important to count all children in the 2020 census?
Absolutely. Buenos dias, and thank you so much for including me in this Chisme, Cafecito, y what's the other one? Census.
It's a tongue twister.
And what's so important for us. Well, first of all, I have to just shout out, vote Gabriella, vote Adelita in our primary in August. We just have to make that happen. It's just very, very cool to have a Native woman running, a Latino woman running, both from our community, and I'll take that opportunity every time. So back to the census. People throw around figures and numbers and data and all the time. And so many times people think, how'd they get that number? Where's that number come from? And that number comes from the census. Okay. And so if you've ever been, and think about how that data is used for everything for the next 10 years. It's used for funding federal grants, for funding, looking at how a population grows in a community, for urban development, when it looks at everything you can think of, whenever you've seen how many people, how many students, what age level, what race, what economic level, all of those figures that you see. And if you've ever questioned that figure and go, really? That goes back to the census. And so what's so powerful about the census is that it's not like there's all these different organizations out there doing this work. This is kind of the one we all agree on, that this figure is the valid figure for that information. And so we have to have everybody included, absolutely everybody included in that information. And like Gabriella talked about, the amount of money that's then brought to the community for that. And it's trifle, it's just exponential how much impact that number has. And so if you are not including your kiddos or your abuelas or everybody in that information, then the amount of money that is needed, the amount of funding, the amount of opportunities that's needed for those distinct populations won't be there. And so that's just why I know there's so much, there's fear, especially for our undocumented population, thinking that you can't know about me, but there is, we have to stand up. When you think about that no fear attitude of our dreamers who stood up to say, look at me, I'm undocumented, I'm unafraid, just got chills thinking about that activism. That's the mind and the attitude you have to take with the census, because we need to prove that you're here and that you matter and that your needs matter, and that data drives everything.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Kristel. Thank you for bringing up data. Us census nerds love to talk about data, right? And it's true, right? A lot of folks say, and we see it, people complain, and it's like, hey, let's look at history. Let's look at the data. Data is so important. So muchas gracias. Adelita, can you please tell us the importance of counting all children in the 2020 census, por favor?
So what usually happens, in my opinion, when people are going through the process of putting all their family into the census, it took literally 5 minutes, and I did it, and it's my family of 5. But I think one of the big issues is people are very afraid to reveal any information to anybody. And so if you are undocumented, how comfortable are you going to be to share not only your information, your child's information, date of birth, any information that can tie back to that child is so frightening. And what my cousin actually worked with a census. She was a supervisor, and they had a huge crew of people that would call around and say, hey, we sent out your census information and didn't hear back. Not surprisingly, with this administration, those programs were cut. And so there isn't anyone following up. And so I anticipate that we're going to have a pretty significant drop across the nation, because in every city, there used to be this function that was part of the census. And that's what they did. It was part of our government. They would call and make sure people were being represented. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. So I think that we have to try to figure out a way to communicate to our community that this is something that they shouldn't be fearful of. It's something that's important. But quite frankly, how do we guarantee that in this environment with this administration? I don't know that there's a way to do it. And so minimally making sure that everybody that feels comfortable giving their information out, just fill it out, because you're really speaking for so many that will not feel comfortable to do it. Everybody that doesn't have a stable home, anybody that, you know, hasn't registered in any program, those are the people that we have to represent by putting our, you know, keeping track of the people that we know and love and can and we can share their information, because there's going to be millions that don't do it.
Right. Thank you, Adelita. So yes, really great information. As we know, the census is confidential. So this information, when you fill out the census, folks, the only information that the census is asking for is your name, who's living there, how is that person related to. The census is completely confidential. So we know that the census is safe. All we want to know is data so that we can understand what that looks like for our public education and for students. So that actually goes into our next segment that we're going to talk about here. And we'll start off in the same order. Gabriella, if you can kick us off. I'm trying to give you my nickname, but I want to call you Gabriella. But we want to talk about how the implications of an undercount of Latino children impact our communities. What are those resources exactly? What does that look like? So yeah, can you let us know, Gabby, what that looks like?
Okay, so you know, I mostly work with Native American students, and I was thinking about it today about what the implications are, and there's the term genocide where you kill people, and you know, in the United States we have a huge history of genocide. There, of course, I have survived genocide, but there's also a term called statistical genocide, where you kill people on paper. And so one of the things that happens in Native communities, and this has been since the history of colonization, it's the erasing of indigenous people. This is one of those ways that can be done, because if you're not reporting a number of people and your neighbors don't, and the members in your community don't, and then your tribe doesn't report these numbers, they say, well, you know, 10 years ago there were 10,000 Tohono tribal members, and then this year there are only 6,000 tribal members. Where did 4,000 tribal members go? And so then they start coming out with these absurd things of like, well, those were maybe not real Native Americans, and this concept of who qualifies as a Native American and who doesn't starts to come up, and when those conversations, those are rooted in white supremacy. When those conversations start, they then question what is Native American, who belongs to this tribe, why do we have this certain population, and then they talk about taking resources. So one of the things that is happening during this whole COVID pandemic is that the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe in Massachusetts, the one that was credited with being the first to welcome the Pilgrims for Thanksgiving, they have actually had their land taken away during this time. That is something that can happen. People can programs can push, administrations can push to take away land and to take away resources. And so I think it's so critical for us as a people to make sure, and even, you know, not only within the Native American community, the Latino community too, to show, people keep talking about people of color being minorities. We're not minorities. We're the majority. We're the majority of people. And if we show those numbers and we show what our power is as people, then I think that, you know, that is something that is going to help change our future administrations. But we have to see those numbers to have the data to back it up. And so it's absolutely critical.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabby. Thanks for sharing that. I'm like trying to invite everybody to join in right now because this is good chisme. This is good information. So thank you for sharing. Kristel, can you let us know what those implications look like in Tucson if we make sure that we have an accurate count in Arizona?
Absolutely. And I don't think I can say it better than Gabriella just said it. And I already said that every time I come on, I'm going to say Gabriella and Adelita are running for office. And you have to in the primary in August and then again in November. And why that matters is thinking about your vote, right? When you think about your vote counts, right? The other opportunity you have is to be counted in the census. And so think about is that when I mark myself and my family, the 6, the 5, the 3 that live in my home, that honestly is your vote for 10 years. That is your vote that impacts 10 years of so much. And I'll talk just in Tucson about 2 things. One is really about federal programs in education, because we have Title I, Title II, Title III. You hear about all these title programs and grants, and we qualify for, and that Department of Education then plans on how funds will be used, how tax dollars will be used, federal tax dollars, to then help schools, public schools in our community. And we need the numbers to prove who we are and then what programs we would qualify for. Then with that, when we think about redistricting, and I know Adelita is going to talk more about this too, I hope, but we have one shot every 10 years to draw the map in our state, and then how many representatives we have in those different sections of our state. And that's everything. That's absolutely everything, because and then the fight, and this is a whole other conversation, the fight of drawing that map, right? But we need to absolutely understand who is in every single section of Arizona, including here in Tucson, because then we know, then the fight goes to draw the map and then to get representatives who then advocate for us at the national level. And so it's really, you know, we vote every November, August primaries, and then we vote in November for so much. But really, when you identify yourself, and you don't even have to be a citizen, right? If you think about that. And so you have to be a citizen to actually vote. You don't have to be a citizen to fill out the census. So it's honestly, if you are undocumented, it is your chance to vote and be counted when you can't in an election. And we know that.
I'll ask you your citizenship question.
Yes, it does. Yeah, and we fought for that. We absolutely fought.
Yes.
So you could be counted if you're not a citizen. And so it's your shot to be, I mean, and just think about it as it's your way to vote every single year for something. When you just take, Adelita said 5 minutes. I think you could do it in 3. The census in no time.
Correct.
No, for my 5 people in my family, it took me 5 minutes. It didn't take very long at all. So that I'm putting in information for 5 people.
Right.
Yeah.
My cuñada was like, okay, is this where I do it? She sent me a picture of it. And then like 2 minutes later, she's like, wait, that's it? I feel like I just got robbed. And I was like, yeah. She's like, I feel like I cheated a test. I was like, yeah, it's super easy.
It's really fast.
really quick, Kristel, that was so great. And Adelita, I'm going to prompt you so that we can continue talking about this. But I wanted to also, because this is this is civic engagement discussion. So when is the primary election? Because it has changed. Isn't it earlier in August now?
It's August 4th. So it did move up. And then the general election
now to vote. And I also want to mention, y'all, that the Arizona legislature was actually, I don't even know if this passed. Liz Luna will hate me for not knowing this exactly, but I know that they were actually also seeing if, that they were trying to change a law that would suggest that instead of redistricting based on census data, that they were wanting to do redistricting based on who voted. As a result. And so I don't that was something that was in the process. I don't know where it's at right now, but that's just an example of why we need proper representation and how being counted in the census and offers us the opportunity to have proper representation, because we know how many folks are living in the community and what that looks like as far as, how many bodies can actually cover and represent that area. So I'll stop there, Adelita, and if you want to go in again about how being counted in the census, impacts our community.
It really does boil down to representation. If you think about the kinds of people that are really strong advocates in their own communities and look at a statewide, we have so few candidates that are in a statewide position that are people of color. And the reason is because when you look at who votes overall, we as people of color do not turn out. And so they discount us. And so when you look at national campaigns on, who's going to be our nominee for our party, whichever party you're into, what's going to end up happening is you tend to continue to see the same type of person. It is usually a male, usually Caucasian, because those are the people that turn out. So you're attracted to that, people tend to be attracted to what they're familiar with. My problem with what people continuing to say that we are minority, I stopped using that. I want to say 6 years ago. I was sitting in on a breakout session for a National School Board Association national. And it was one of the last times we were able to go. But this gentleman got up and said, why do we keep saying minority? We are not a minority. It's the African-American man, and said, and if we all get together and say we are people of color, children of color, you're not marginalizing us to be less than. Because if you're the majority, you're bigger. And he's like, and that's just not true. So we need to stop saying minority as a people. We just need to say people of color, because that is more an accurate representation. And when you say that, you look at so many people that we really are the largest number when we consolidate all of it. The issue with representation is if we don't change and have an accurate representation of the number of people that are in our area, we won't get any more representatives representatives for state legislature, representatives for Congress. That's what's going to change. And so when you have the kind of numbers that representatives have in California, they tend to have a lot more weight than people that are in Arizona, because there's just more of them. So I feel like that is something that is really critical, but also the kind of federal programs that can be funneled through our states when we have accurate numbers is really critical. And it tends to hurt us a lot when we have small little areas in our state that have really strong representation that do not represent, let's say, for example, public education. So you have these really small rural communities that have people that have a lot of influence over the vast majority of us, because those people in that community vote. Those people make sure that they were counted. And unfortunately, we don't. So our legislative districts are tiny, but in comparison to the number of people, really, it's like an uphill battle for us. And there are certain issues that should be nonpartisan. And in my opinion, public education has historically been and should be again. That's not where we are. But if we get representation that is more in line with our beliefs and values at our own local level, then that will change.
Yeah. Thank you, Adelita. Thank you. Ooh, some water. Yes, everybody drink some water. I actually forgot my water.
Caffeine.
I'm usually really good about keeping my water with me because we need to keep hydrated.
It's cafecito. We're drinking cafe.
Café, salud. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
See, so proper representation is actually, and everything that we all just talked about brings us to the last part of our cafecito, which went by so quickly, but thank you. And thank you all Facebook friends. If you guys are watching, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask here, but I do see some folks have some questions. Please drop them in the comment and we'll follow up with you, promise. So the last thing is, why Latino youth are missed in the census. We can talk about that, and I think specifically talking about how we can take action. What are some creative ways that we can start to, call our friends, family, and make sure that folks are being counted in the census. But I really want to hear from you all. Why do you think Latino youth are missed in the census? We know that, a lot of times folks are move, or they have, the child is with, different parents. The parents don't know if they should be counted. But I really want to hear from you all, like, what can we do as a community to ensure that folks are being counted, specifically in Pima County and across Arizona? So I'll leave it there. And Kristel, you're actually right in the front of my camera right now. So yeah, the green. So we'll switch it up a little bit here. Why don't you go ahead and go first, Kristel, and let us know why Latino youth are missed in the census and what we can do to change that.
All right, I do want to jump back to something that in the previous question, I think you had asked, like, what specific programs, and I just want to make sure people understand things like school lunch, things like after school programs, things like our reading support, all of those. So if there's not enough specialists and help to help kids with specific skills, that comes from title programs. Our free and reduced lunch program, and so when it comes to school lunches and school breakfasts, that comes from federal programs. So when you think about so much, a part of what happens at schools really comes from, there's opportunities from those federal grants. But then about our Latino youth, I think it's being undercounted. I think it comes to, we talked about the fear, right? The fear of we know we're in Arizona, and we understand the fear that has driven populations to not engage in voting, to not engage in anything. And so I think there's also an element of apathy that, we vote and nothing ever changes and nothing ever happens. And so people think, why does it doesn't matter. I've never seen anything change. And so that attitude, I think, is contagious, unfortunately. And so people can think they can disengage in the process when it comes to voting or when it comes to being counted with the census. And so I think it's really the way we tackle it is the way we tackle every campaign that we do, right? It's just about engaging and mobilizing and communicating and telling people how easy it is and how safe it is, and that it does matter. It absolutely matters. And it's all of those evils that we combat when we try to run for office and have people believe in the system and that your vote matters, and your vote does matter. I think we all learned that in 2016, absolutely. And this matters because, like we talked about, so much a part of our voting structure depends on these numbers. And I just want to say something to think when Adelita compared it to California. Every state gets 2 senators, and that's just by design, right? So there's 100 senators, and that is what it is, right? You don't get to change that. And I think we as a nation have to think about how that, wait a second, we have these populations that are dwindling in some states and growing exponentially in others, but it's still only everybody gets 2 voices there in the Senate and every state. And so the representatives, that that is all dependent on the population, absolutely dependent on the population. And so at some points in history, we had 2, then 4, then 8. And as our population grows, we have to, that is how we are so impactful in Washington to understand who Arizona truly, truly is. And when Adelita talked about, you know, old white guys are in power, right? And we know that they vote. And so that's, I mean, if we could do that, you know, if we can get every single person of color to vote at the same rate, that truly is how we change our representation to make sure that what happens in Washington, which impacts the federal dollars for all of these programs, and I just want to reiterate again, you can do this if you can be counted in the census, and you don't even have to study for this, you guys. You know, when you think about who you vote for, you have to study, and you got to figure out who is that person really, and who am I really going to trust with my vote. You don't have to study for this at all. You know how many people are living in your house and how many people you're feeding. That's no work. And so this is your vote with no work attached at all, and you just, and again, it endures for 10 years.
Right. Thank you, Kristel. Muchas gracias. Adelita, I'll go with you next since we've had you go last. But this is definitely, again, open environment. So, I mean, if you want to continue to talk about what those implications look like, what the Red for Ed movement looks like, whatever's on your mind about, making sure folks get counted, please, this is your space. These questions are just prompts to allow for the conversation, but this is your space, so please.
I mean, I know that the question had to do with Latino children in general, but I do keep going back to children of color, all color, because they're the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. And so what you end up doing when you ask their specific issues, where it's like, well, let's talk about this specific community, what we do is we cut our numbers up. And so it makes it look like, oh, well, you only have this little tiny number of African-American children in, let's say, Tucson Unified. You only have this tiny little bit of children that are Native, but we don't know what the history is. I know personally that I have, like my nieces and nephews are biracial, and in certain, depending on what who's asking, they don't let you put multi. You have to pick one or the other. And I know that historically my tata is Yaqui, but he was separated from that side of the family, and so we've never identified as Yaqui. But if you look at our family, we're definitely Native, but we've never been able to identify it. And I think a lot of our kids are like that. And when there was stigma attached to being a child of color, when you're a Latino, you would say, if you're Mexican, you would say you're Spanish. If you're Native, you would say you're Mexican or Italian, or so. There's a lot of that historical kind of stuff that we don't know how far back that goes. And so I do feel like that's important for us to continue to do. But I also think that in order to reach these communities, you have to do outreach in native languages. You can't just put it out in English and hope for the best, because that's not going to happen. And we also know that there are families that have people that are not fluent in any language. So it's kind of a combination, you have to do a little bit of English, a little bit of Spanish, a little bit of, you just mix it up, because that whatever is going to work for the people, I think that's what we have to do. And just trying to build upon the fact that you're not going to be penalized. It's totally confidential, and trying to convince people that it's confidential in this environment is an uphill. So making sure that everybody that is a citizen that can be counted, to make sure to count yourself, because you are representing all those people that we do it with the school board stuff. We want them to put in for free and reduced lunch, and they won't do it. We know that they qualify, and they won't do it because they're afraid. And so their children will go without, because that's better than anyone knowing any details about their family. That's just a reality that we have to live with. And as much as we try to tell them this is a safe space, I mean, I know many instances in Arizona where we've had you know, people come on to enforce immigration policy on campuses. So you can't say this is a safe space and then they hear a story about it not being a safe space. So as much as we try to do that, I think, you know, it is a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Adelita. And this is actually a great way to bring you, Gabriella, to talk about, you know, I know that the Tohono O'odham Nation is asking folks to actually write in Tohono O'odham as a tribe because that's not identified so I'm actually going to stop there and allow you to talk if you want to talk about that more. And I also want to mention too that this census is a little different. We are able to, you know, whatever race and ethnicity you identify with, you're able to check mark those boxes, which is really cool because if you're an Afro-Latino, hey, you know, you can check those boxes. So Gabby, do you want to tell us, you know, how you feel and please share, you know, this is your space. So my prompt question was how to ensure that we make sure Latino youth, but please let us know how we can ensure a full census count in all communities.
Right. So I haven't filled out the census yet. I was waiting so that I could do it live, which I will be doing. And that's one of my tactics to try to get people excited and to see how easy it is. Because I think that a lot of people really struggle with the processes, or they feel overwhelmed by it. And so I really try to make an effort to simplify things and to just show people how easy it is and what websites actually look like and, you know, where they connect to and the kind of information that you can find on them. And so I like to do things like that. That is going to be that's a tactic that is for me to show people how easy it is and to get them excited and to get them thinking about it. So number one, you know, we need to be talking about it as a community. A lot of us right now, we are jumping onto Facebook Live videos with all of our friends. We're doing it with our employees, fellow employees with work. We're doing it with community organizing spaces. We need to be talking about them in every single space. I was even in a space where I was one of probably only 3 people of color on the whole call, and there was like 100 people on the call. And I brought it up in another space and they were like, oh, I didn't know. Oh, everybody has to fill this out, even if I'm from Canada? Like, yeah, like we have to talk about it in every single space. Posting about it on Facebook, on Twitter, on Snapchat, on TikTok, whatever, my cat just jumped up. Whatever platform that it is that you're using, you don't have to be somebody with credentials to share this information. You don't have to be somebody who's affiliated with the census. It's part of what we need right now for 10 years. Document it in history that you were part of the census movement. I encourage people to go Facebook Live if they can, to talk about it. And to just do the process, because people are really surprised by how short it takes. I was really excited to watch Anna Karina go Facebook Live. She had
you made me so nervous, but it was fun. But it was fun because you were asking me questions and it was like interactive.
But see, even that, like, I would not have thought about doing my census on Facebook Live if it hadn't been for you being a leader and modeling that behavior. And so if people are modeling that behavior, it continues to go on. And then text your siblings. Oh my gosh. So the people that are watching this right now, the people who are tuned in and panelists, like, this is Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. We're kind of a little different, right? And thank you so much for joining us. But we're a little different because we're maybe a little more engaged, or maybe we're wanting to be more engaged, and that's really excellent. But there's a lot of people who are asleep right now. There's a lot of people who are not going to watch this video. And so if you're watching this, we need you. We need you to get out of your bubble because we're all in a bubble. We're all in the same bubble. We're book nerds, we're data nerds, we're nerds, right? But we need to reach out. I need to text my sister. I need to text my brother. I need to text my friends who aren't on social media. I have a bunch of those, which I think is really weird. And we need to do that. And we have, some people have the time. Message everybody in your Facebook Messenger. There's a lot of different ways, but make sure you're targeting those heads of families, those nanas and tatas, and your aunties. Get those aunties. American women, indigenous women, Native women, Latino women, Black women, we make stuff happen.
Yes.
So text, those are the people that need to make, who need to get on the phones and start, whooping those nieces and nephews over via text. Like, hey, did you get your census? Like, never underestimate the power of those women, because they're the ones who make things happen. So
True.
Can I say
That's
two
awesome.
things, Ana Karina?
Yes, please do.
So think about how hard it is to do your taxes.
Right.
And you have to do that every year. I haven't done my taxes yet. It's on my calendar and I move it every day. Taxes, taxes, taxes. That's not this. That is
Right.
not this. This is not that. And it's so easy. And it's like, oh, the census came up. Oh, I can do that. Bam. And if you do your taxes, like, you have no excuse. This is like easy. This is nothing compared to that. And then the last thing is that Gabriella and Adelita are running for office, and you have to vote.
A good campaign supporter, isn't she, Gabriella?
It's so funny. I actually had a really cool prompt question on my Facebook Live. Somebody was asking about, incarcerated folks. I'm trying to find the question. What about the people falsely incarcerated to keep the government running? I just want to kind of quickly just talk about, I think some folks have asked me, why do we want to count people in prisons, right? Why do we want to fund prisons? But I think what we need to think about is, as a civil rights movement, right? We can't, change. I'm bringing this up because we can talk about the school to prison pipeline in connecting that. And how we need resources for our schools so that we can have, we can educate our children so we can have they can have that future, they can have those resources. So I just wanted to, I don't know if you all want to chime in on that. That was a question that prompted up here.
I talk a lot about this in particular because in Arizona, we have decided we have no longer, we're no longer trying to hide the fact. We all agree that Arizona is part of the prison industrial complex. We all agree on that. But we disenfranchise these people with felonies. In fact, we dehumanize them by calling them felons, as if that is their separate person for the whole rest of their life. They're just a felon. And so I always use people with felonies because they're still a person, but they also have this felony. But they will struggle the most to find housing, to find a job. They will may end up being most dependent on the system, but least able to help make decisions about those services that they actually receive. And so we have to, part of finding out who is in prison and what they do is they actually, the U.S. Census contacts the prisons, they contact the jail. They want to see who's in there on April 1st, and that's the number that they're using for those areas. But we need to know how many people are in there because that's part of the narrative of what's happening. If we're ever going to change this this incarceration, high incarceration rates of Black and brown people, and these high incarceration rates that for people with nonviolent offenses and things like that, if we don't have the numbers of how much our state is using and allocating those resources for the prison, we're never going to really fully understand how much it's draining away from our public education and all of those things. We tend to point the finger a lot at people with felonies or people who are incarcerated as, you know, they're criminals, they've done something wrong. But a lot of times it's a lack of opportunity. It's a lack of training and funding, you know, those types of things. Because if people had the opportunity to go make money in a job where, you know, they could go every single day and they could feel secure and they could have healthcare benefits and they could have a retirement and those types of things, people would. People want to have living wages and thriving wages.
Right.
People go to doing other things because of the lack of opportunity, economic opportunities. And then that's why you see it less in affluent communities where they have money to put into those types of things where they provide opportunities.
Right.
So don't be persuaded otherwise, but we need to know what those numbers are because those numbers have gotten outrageous and we are allocating so much money to simply caging people and not educating and not trying to reintroduce people into our communities and not providing services for the people who are struggling. So then they are more likely to end up in there again. We're just caging people.
Right.
You know, Ana Karina, I know we're running out of time, but
Yeah.
I was in a presentation once, and if you think about the art of the map with this that the census creates, and we were it wasn't Arizona, I don't believe, but I'll just say, they said, so why this big population of Native people right here in the middle of this? Well, what's that? And the presenter said, that's prison. And so when you think of the art of the map for 10 years, by counting our prisoners, by counting and showing the ethnicity of our prisoners, it shows up on that map and you can't ignore it. And the injustice that's happened to our people of color in prisons is blatant on that map, and nobody can ignore, like, what's that? Why are they right there in the middle of there? What's that about? That's not by the border. Nope, that's prison. And I think that has always resonated with me, and that has to be there to show the reality of who we are. Right.
Thank you for sharing that. I do have a comment from Rosa Morales. It says, it is important to emphasize that census data dictates representation in Congress and Senate. More representatives from Arizona means more advocates for Arizona and more votes when important decisions are made. Census numbers equals political power, and that's from Rosa Morales. It's a great way to end our segment. So I just want to say muchísimas gracias. Thank you all so much. I don't know if you have last final words. We are at our ending point here.
I do just want to chime in a little bit about if a child is suspended from school for one day, they are 50% less likely to graduate from high school. One day. So those numbers are real and major. And then if you look at the number of people who are incarcerated right now, over 65% of them do not have a high school diploma. So education is strongly tied to that, which is why we keep talking about restorative practices and doing something different than kicking our most vulnerable kids out of school. But we need support to do that. And so we have to change a lot of the narrative. But I do think that it's important for us to count everyone, because the vast majority of the people that are incarcerated now are not going to stay incarcerated. They're in our communities. And so that brings up a whole other conversation about the kind of programs that we need to do to support everybody, including prevention programs are huge. And that money is $1 prevention is like $24 in intervention services. And we spend 5 times as much incarcerating a person than we do in educating a person. And this is just basics. And then when I went to school in TUSD, TUSD was getting $8,000 per child from the state. Now we get less than $5,000, and things are not cheaper
Right.
in the last, 25 years. So I just think that
Right.
giving some perspective on that and the supports that we need in education is huge.
Yes. Thank you for that, Adelita. Thank you for ending on such a strong and powerful note. I just wrote down prevention services, maybe for our next cafecito to talk about that. That's why I love these cafecitos. They always bring up sparking new ideas of what do we need to continue to talk more about. Rosana Gabaldon says, great conversations, much appreciation. To share, much appreciation for your willingness to share your thoughts. And that was from Rosana. So I'm really excited. Muchas gracias, mujeres. This was really a very awesome plática. We will, next week is actually, we're launching, it's the National Latino Census Week. So we'll be sharing this video with folks on Wednesday, which is our day to advocate for counting young children. So we'll be sure to be sharing this with folks. Thank you, muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros ahora. I think this was a really powerful conversation. We got a lot of love on Facebook. Sandy Ochoa says, thank you, Kristel. She says, awesome, Gabriela. Gracias, Adelita. So got lots of love here on Facebook for you all. But that concludes our cafecito. Muchas gracias. I hope you have a really wonderful weekend. Enjoy time with your family. Los mando muchos abrazos. Gabby, Kristel, Adelita, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.